this. As a reminder, we record these meetings for members who missed the session. I'm also going to activate the closed captioning if you need that. You'll find it along the bottom of your screen. Please enunciate clearly into your microphone to help it work effectively. If you ever need any other accommodations, please reach out to myself or to Christy so that we can help make sure that you are able to fully participate in this meeting. So welcome everyone to the Community Mobility Committee. As a reminder, this is a place for residents and interested individuals to advocate for and learn about mobility and transportation issues in the city of St. Louis. Please be respectful in our conversations and questions today. We're really grateful to have so many folks from the city here, and we encourage everyone who's participating to be respectful of their hard work and efforts, as well as the varying opinions within this group. In our time here today, please avoid jargon and acronyms. If you're using a technical transportation term, ideally share a link in the chat. Not all of our members are familiar with this language, and we want to create an inclusive space for learning. Please be mindful of time. We will be encouraging more follow-up to happen outside of our CMC meetings, both through notes and direct answers to questions. We hope that this allows us to keep our meetings focused and respectful. We encourage you to use the chat for those questions and follow-up. So we're lucky today to have a number of city staff and elected officials here with us. So I'm going to ask those folks to do a popcorn round of introduction to let us know who is here in the space. And I'm going to start with Andrew.
Hello, so I'm Andrew Lackey, and I'm with the St. Louis City Office on the Disabled. I'm the Deputy Commissioner, and I am going to send it over to Scott.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Scott Ogilvy, City of St. Louis Planning and Urban Design Agency, Program Manager for Complete Streets. And how about Christine goes next?
Good afternoon, everyone. Christine Ingracia, Director of Operations for President Megan Green. I don't see any. Oh, John Kohler, you're up.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm John Kohler, Planning and Programming Manager for the city's Board of Public Service, and I will pass it to Grace.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, just joined. Grace Young, Mayor's Office.
And I think that is all of our city staff today. Thank you all so much for being here, and especially thanks to Christine for joining and also for sponsoring the original resolution that created the Community Mobility Committee. Very full circle. So I'm going to hand it over to Christy for our next section.
Awesome. Thank you. Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. So our minutes from the last month's meeting were included in the agenda email, and we included it in our chat. Were there any questions or concerns about the minutes from last meeting?
I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks, Jackie. So we do have the minutes approved. Next, so we're going to move to the sharing concerns portion of the meeting. So rather than having a dialogue about the issues raised, we invite any members of the committee or the public to share concerns, observations, or questions for up to 2 minutes. We will also share email comments that we receive, but we will not ask for verbal response or feedback to these comments, although you can chime in the chat. But after the meeting, we will follow up with the appropriate individuals and share the responses in the meeting notes, or invite appropriate individuals to give a response at the next meeting. So with that said, I'd like to open the floor. Are there any concerns or questions or observations about mobility around St. Louis? We have a question in the chat from Patrick. When should we expect an update on education and enforcement from the mayor's office?
Sorry, Liz, do you want me to give a quick update on that?
Grace, if you have a quick update that you would like to provide, but I will also say that we have not yet done this, but we are intending to invite the mayor's office and the city staff to the April meeting for a much fuller update on their efforts.
Sure, I'll do a 5-second quick update for education. Actually, as of, I forget if it was yesterday or late last week, we applied for a $150,000 grant from MODOT on driver's education. So we're anticipating to hear back hopefully in April for that grant. Casey Milberg, our policy director in the office, was the lead and submitted that grant. In terms of enforcement, we are, of course, working with SLMPD to always get a better understanding of what they're doing on traffic enforcement strategies, but our office, as well as the president's office, are discussing opportunities to see if there's an path forward on automated enforcement as well.
Thanks, Grace. We have a couple hands raised. Jackie, would you like to unmute yourself or would you like to put it in the chat?
Yeah, I can go. Thanks. First of all, I want to say thank you to everybody for your hard work on getting the infrastructure bill passed. That's really exciting to see some of that money go towards longer term solutions to enhancing mobility in St. Louis. But I did want to bring up a concern about something that I feel like we could be working on more immediate, and that is rerouting bikes and pedestrians through construction detours. There's a lot of really unsafe situations going on in the city right now where people are forced to walk in the vehicular lane of travel, actually an entire transit stop behind construction fencing. And it feels like this is something that we could be requiring contractors to pay to set up detours. So just would like to try to figure out a way that we could make some progress on this issue.
Thanks. Kia, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, and not on that topic, but on a different topic. Is that okay? Sure. So this isn't a concern so much as just an opportunity, I suppose, but I'm doing some reporting lately around the reintroduction of the federal e-bike credit, and the national organizations behind that bill are pairing it with a push to state and local and regional organizations to complement it with point of sale rebates and other opportunities to increase electric mobility in cities. There was a really wildly significant program out of Denver earlier this year that the stats kind of just came back on, and 71% of participants are replacing car trips with these. It was rolled into their sort of local climate initiative that was approved through by voters. And yeah, I don't know if it's the role of this committee specifically, or if it's the role of us individually as citizens to come to our elders with this idea, but I'm really heartened and inspired by the change that it's having on our peer cities. And I would love to see something similar pursued here. And it's becoming the kind of thing that is now reaching the national stage. And there's also about 180 different, I can send you all tracker programs like it around America. And many of them are in communities of our size. And just wanted to put that on people's radar in case it isn't already.
Thanks for that. Any other comments, concerns, questions, observations?
This is Taylor March, and I'm going to be talking a little bit later about distracted driving stuff, but just from a resident perspective, I'm in Carondelet, and I wanted to highlight the construction that's happening from Spire on Morgan Ford right now. The bike lanes were just put in 6 months ago. I know that there's been some controversy over the design of those, but the facility there is already patchworked with holes from Spire, and I'm just worried about the condition that's going to go back in after those are completed, and just personally frustrated because it feels like every time we get a bike facility on a road, it's 6 months later and then Spire's coming through. And I know that the coordination is difficult, but I just like to see that happening in a more coordinated way because it almost feels vindictive at this point.
Thanks, Taylor. Christine made a comment in the chat. She said she reached out to Bethany with streets about implementation of work zone mobility ordinances and what funding streets needs to make this legislation work well in the city. So she hopes to have more information on that soon. Thanks, Christine. Kia also put the link to the e-bike incentive tracker. Anything else?
Can I make a comment as a resident, Kristen?
Go for it.
I want to make two comments. One, I've really enjoyed riding on the Louisiana Calm Street, and I hope it does not suffer the what Taylor just described about Spire digging it up, but it's very exciting to see that infrastructure coming to life finally. And then second, I really enjoyed seeing pictures of the mayor riding transit today, and I want to give a shout out to Edie Hemphill from B-Works for putting out that charge to electeds to use transit. So I'm thrilled to see that, and I hope we see more of it.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. I said, okay, Mayor. Anything else? Go once. Going twice. Kalina says, last I recall, St. Louis requires contractors to fill holes back except the last 1.5 inches of pavement of asphalt. And then St. Louis fills that or the potholes at once in the springtime. I wonder if that duty can be passed back to the utilities completely finish the job. I wonder too. All right, if there's no more questions, comments, or concerns, we will move on to the next portion.
So Christy and I want to give just a brief update about where we're at with the Community Mobility Committee, a 2-year update. We have never done this before, so this is a little bit of an experimental opportunity for us to tell you some of the things that we're thinking about and just give some reminders about the structure of the committee. This is going to be pretty brief. Many of you are pretty familiar with this already, but we're working on ways to be a little bit more transparent about what we're thinking about and how things are operating. So I'm going to hand it over to Christy to get started.
Perfect, thank you. So you may or may not know that the CMC was formed by Resolution 211 in February 2021. And we were founded as an advisory committee dedicated to understanding the changing dynamics of mobility across St. Louis. So we were created to advise the city of St. Louis and local transportation, parks, and planning agencies on planning, policy, design, funding, education, and enforcement efforts regarding the creation, maintenance, and operation of non-vehicular traffic. Oh, that's a lot of words. Essentially, we keep the city moving. We help advise the city of St. Louis on how to keep St. Louis moving in a nice, seamless fashion, but also in a safe manner. We work to ensure sensitivity to the issues and design and implementation of public and private projects, which have an impact on our network, on our transportation network. So who are we? We are all volunteers in this committee. As we said, we are focused solely on the city of St. Louis, but we act as advisors on both projects and policy. So going to some of our core pillars, in the past, we have generally asked for these 6 things. We thought it would be best to make this visually appealing because, we send out a lot of letters and it can get easy to get confused on what we're actually asking for, what we're showing up for, and what we want to see happen in the city. So we are looking at comprehensive approaches to projects and policy. So to maintenance, design, construction, and implementation of these projects. We want things that are happening in the city to focus on accessibility. So how do projects and policies improve access and safety for people with disabilities? We want to advocate for things around culture change. So reducing our dependence on cars and changing the culture around transportation to address the needs of vulnerable users. Right now, safety is the big buzzword. We definitely want to push and advocate for safety. And we are working towards 0 roadway fatalities and improving safety for all mode users. So not just those in cars, not just those on metro or bus, but those who are also walking and biking and taking scooter, whatever mode you decide to get around. We want to make sure St. Louis residents and travelers and visitors can get around safely. Engagement. We know engagement is a key piece, and if we want all of the needs in the city around mobility to be addressed, we need to focus on engagement. So we want our city leaders to focus on consistent community engagement, transparency, and participation in decision-making opportunities. And lastly, equity. We know that there has been a lot of inequities in our transportation planning in the past, but we're working with our leaders to make sure that that's at the forefront of their minds for any project and for any plans and policies. So we want to make sure that they address historic racial inequities and investment and attention. So how do we show up as a CMC? Like I said, we are influencers, and here are some of our mechanisms for using the influence. Liz, you want to take it over?
Yeah. So some of the ways that we influence our work is that we send official statements and letters. So we document official positions through written letters that go to people in positions of power. Many of those letters are pointed at the mayor or members of the Board of Aldermen, but we have occasionally sent letters to other people, including people at the federal level and the state level. We also provide feedback and input. So we act as advisors when we invite folks to come and present on projects in these meetings or in subcommittee meetings. We provide input about what people who are getting around the city of St. Louis think into those projects or those policies. We also cultivate trusting relationships with city staff, elected and regional partners. We're here to represent our experiences as residents and visitors to the city and to ensure that we have those strong relationships of trust. And then finally, we educate, share resources and ideas. And some of that comes through these meetings where folks attend and learn more about what's happening across the region and then might advocate or advise in their own way, particularly around things that happen at the neighborhood level where decisions are made by individual alder people. So just to reiterate where we're at, we're an all-volunteer committee, we're focused on the city of St. Louis, and we're advisory on both projects and policy. I'll hand it back to Christy.
Thanks. So as we position ourselves to be influencers on all these things, we thought it'd be important to remind you that we are not City of St. Louis employees. So I know that there's a lot of asks. We have a lot of passionate individuals in the group, and we love that, but we cannot take on the duties of City of St. Louis employees. That's why we advocate for things like having staff or setting aside funding for staff to be in certain positions. We're also not decision makers. Yes, we can influence the way policies, which direction they take. At the end of the day, we don't have power to make certain decisions. We also do not produce materials for the adoption or use by the city of St. Louis. So you won't see the CMC creating big projects or producing policy documents or guides or anything like that. If we do produce guides, please be mindful that they're just to advise. The city will not adopt this as doctrine. So just know that. We also don't speak on the behalf of the city, even though we are their advisors and we push for certain things to take place. When we're out in the public, we are not speaking on behalf of the city. So with that said, I know, like I said, we have a lot of passionate individuals who want to get involved and want to channel their energy into some things. So next we're going to talk about committee membership and how you can get involved.
Yeah, so per our resolution, we can have up to 31 voting members. In 2021, we adopted an open seats concept in order to ensure that our voting membership is representative of the city. So those categories that we're thinking about include things like geography, mode of transportation, racial identity, gender identity, and other core characteristics. The engagement committee is responsible for reviewing our applications and recommending members to become voting members. So we have two categories of membership. We have voting members and general members. The only difference is that voting members are the ones who vote and approve on the official statements, and they also are responsible for voting in new voting members. Voting members serve for 2 years. We can share more information about that, or you can always ask Dawn, who's the chair of the engagement subcommittee. It is important to highlight that we have a variety of subcommittees. We have a couple that are on pause right now, and we have one that is in the process of sunsetting, traffic calming. Our other two committees are the Engagement Committee and the Safe Streets Committee. And we actually welcome the opportunity to form more specific subcommittees, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. So we have two types of meetings. The first is our full group meeting, which you are currently attending. These are hosted 10 to 11 times a year. They're open to the general public. They provide an opportunity for public comment, and typically they include presentation or information about projects, policies, or things that are going on in the city or that affect the city substantially. We also have a little bit of time for updates from subcommittees. An important thing to point out is that feedback and comments that come in through our full group meeting help shape our official statements and our subcommittee investigations, the way that we position where we're focusing our energy. Subcommittees typically meet monthly or as needed. If you want to join a subcommittee, you'll contact the subcommittee chair, or Christy and I can help you get in touch with them. In order to form a subcommittee, there needs to be a chair or co-chairs, and there should be a set of goals for a 6-month time frame or less. And you get some input from Christy and I about how to shape that. We want to try and make sure that subcommittees have a targeted thing that they're focused on. So they might choose to investigate a topic, they might help us draft positions, they might debate some of the pros and cons of different options, or they might provide feedback on specific projects or take on a particular project within the committee. I'll say that the exception to that is the Engagement Committee, which has ongoing responsibilities with respect to membership, recruitment, and engagement of members, but they also take on other activities that help to support the whole committee. Okay, so we have just a couple of minutes. If there are any questions about anything that we shared, you can also email Christy and I. As indicated by the fact that this is an update, we're still a pretty new committee, and we're still structuring exactly how we are going to operate and what our role is. So we welcome your feedback and input and your engagement in this process. Stop screen share.
Liz, we did have a question in the chat about why is traffic calming sunsetting? I did provide an answer. It's sunsetting, unfortunately, because we don't have a lot of member participation in the subgroup.
I think let's let Bryce give just a brief update about traffic calming.
Yeah, Christy, well, that is absolutely true. The members that have been involved in this put a lot of work into creating this traffic calming guide that has been since completed and in a sense inspired the city to take a somewhat different and more specific engineering approach to creating their own traffic calming guide that will help future developments of like road reconstruction and stuff. So I think I wasn't there for the creation of the subcommittee, but my understanding is that is what that committee set out to do. And there's sort of a sense that that has been completed. So while we're revisiting the new chapter of what that can look like, I think I sent an email recently sort of redirecting them to the Safe Streets Committee for the time being.
So I can add on to that a little bit, Bryce. As you know, we've worked for a couple of years developing the current guide that was submitted to the city for adoption consideration in the past few months. What we are doing with the city and specifically with the Board of Public Service is taking that guide, and we have contracted with CBB to develop standard traffic calming details and features that can be used for traffic calming. And as you mentioned, we are formalizing the toolkit that the city would like to move forward with for those standard features. So that is a work in progress with our on-call traffic consultant. And we hope that we can, this will be an early action task in addition to all the arterial traffic calming designs that we are just now beginning, And hopefully within several months, we'll have some recommendations or formalized document with traffic calming as part of this effort. Thank you.
Thanks, John and Bryce, for that update. Matt?
Hi, just quickly, just to add something, as somebody that did spend a fair amount of time participating in that group, I do think that the evolution of this is reasonable. There was one aspect of this, though, that I think there's still a need to sort of think about, at least as this document sort of moves towards a more engineering audience. The original intent of the this guide was to provide members of the community with some sort of guide in order to advocate for particular things. And it's this public facing part that I think is going away now. So I do think that there is still a need for something that faces more the public.
Thanks, Matt. I think that's an important point and something we'll stay in conversation with John and BPS about. And in particular, I want to highlight that this is, in fact, kind of the way that we hope that subcommittees will work. They'll have a specific charge that they take on for a period of time, and then that charge might change. They might change their goals or redirect. So while traffic calming might be sunsetting at this moment, that doesn't mean it's not gonna pick back up again in the spirit of trying to figure out how to have things be more accessible to the public or related to other projects. So I think it's an important thing for us to continue to highlight. Patrick.
Is there any way that we can streamline and make it easier for everybody who's not on the committee to understand how people are voting? So
Yes.
Right now, basically the only way that I can know anything is by digging through a bunch of paperwork and hoping that somebody actually recorded it somewhere. And it seems like, you know, half the time that's not getting recorded. So we don't know how people are actually voting. Is there a way that we can streamline this?
Yes, Patrick, we have asked the engagement committee specifically to give us some input on how we can best share back official positions and voting. We hope to have that in place shortly. I do want to point out that at this link on our website, we post all the official positions that we have approved. And each one of those has the list of members who has voted for that specific thing included within the letter. And those are posted immediately after they're sent. So we are working through a process to do a better job of sharing things back. Votes happen entirely via email because not all of our members are available to attend this particular meeting, and we want to ensure their engagement.
And I'm fine with people not being able to attend the meeting and voting online, but there needs to be a record of how people are voting somewhere that the public has access to, and we currently don't have that.
Yeah, Patrick, again, just to point out, it is available on the website for each individual position, but we're not sharing that back to the full committee in a consistent way. We include them at the end of each minute, which each set of minutes, which I agree is too buried in the paperwork. So we're going to have a better process. We're hoping that will be in place by next month.
I'm sorry, and I'm not going to harp on this much longer, but we have no process in place right now. I mean, I don't know how people are voting to include new members. There's no record multiple times for new members being voted into the committee. And that's just not acceptable for a city committee.
Thank you for your feedback. Okay, so we are going to transition to our next topic. As we mentioned, our goal as part of this work is to focus on the city, but one of the things that heavily influences the city is what happens at the state level, the policies that are in place and the decisions that the state legislature make or do not make. So thanks to some support from Rachel Witt and the Safe Streets Committee, we've invited Erin Hutcheson, the Senior Government Relations Specialist at MODOT, and Taylor March, who you all know as our former vice chair from Missourians for Responsible Transportation, to talk a little bit more about what's happening at the state level this year and some of the things that affect our work for safe streets here. I'm going to hand it over to you all.
Yeah, thanks, Liz. I appreciate the invite. Like she said, I'm Erin Hutcheson. I work for MODOT in the governmental relations team. So I'm over at the Capitol. I work with our legislative priorities every year. I think my emphasis is going to be on what we have from a department perspective for our legislative proposals this year. And if you all have any questions for specific legislation or anything outside of the realm of the things that I mentioned, feel free to just stop me whenever, or at the end I can take questions. My emphasis is really at the state level. So if you have questions about what kind of laws exist at the city level, or what kind of things the city can implement on its own, that might be a little bit out of my wheelhouse, but I'd be happy to take a stab at what I can answer. So the first thing, I'm going to go ahead and drop a document in the chat. If you'd like to refer to that, that'll be the basis of my presentation, and you can follow along with that. Historically, we have had legislative proposals focused on safety in our transportation system for many years. A lot of times it's difficult from a State Department perspective to ask for everything you need, because sometimes the more you ask for, the less you get. I'm sure you all are familiar with some things like that. So we have had a huge focus on texting and driving and a hands-free effort the last couple of years, because that is one of those things that we think if we're able to change the state law to make sure that people put their phones down while driving, that'll make a huge impact on the increased fatalities that we've been seeing year after year on the state transportation system, which is really important, I think, for everybody on the roadway, not just the people that are driving, but also our vulnerable road users. This past year, whenever we were revisiting what legislative proposals we would establish, we decided that we really needed to focus more on the things that were lacking as a state. So we decided to adopt a more comprehensive safety package rather than just hands-free. We went through some recommendations from the National Safety Council and Advocates for Highway and Auto Safety. And as it probably comes to no surprise to you all, Missouri ranks terribly among the states for what legislation we have in place to keep people safe on our roadways and otherwise in our transportation system. So we consistently rank towards the bottom. We received an F rating from the National Safety Council, and we took a deep dive into all of those recommendations to see what sort of things we could change legislatively to make people safer. So from this research, we developed the SAFER document, which is safer access for everyone on the roadways. And we identified which of those legislative efforts that we don't have in the state. There were a couple that we didn't think that we needed a legislative fix for. For example, we have some things that are allowed with state law, but the legislature chooses not to fund them. So rather than being a legislative change, it's more of a budgetary issue. And there's also things that we feel that we have good internal processes for that we don't necessarily need legislation, but we don't get credit for it in those reports because we don't have a law that specifically tells us you have to do something this way. So out of that, we divided those recommendations that we believe needed a legislative fix on the state level into 4 different categories. So that encompasses safer for children, safer for teens, safer for highway workers, and safer for you. So we thought that out of all of this, it's not necessarily an omnibus legislation bill. It's really more of a menu of options that out of everybody in the legislature, they're probably going to have an interest in at least one of these categories, or they might have some sort of personal connection to this. So we went through and listed the proposals that we do have and the proposals that we're lacking, which ended up being 18 proposals that we identified in this effort. The first category of safer for children really focuses on safety within the vehicle. So this includes booster seats and rear facing through age 2. And it also includes some concerns for children that are left in hot cars and bicycle helmets for young riders. In the safer for teens category, this really focuses on graduated driver's license changes. Some of these are things that we have in place as a state, but maybe they don't go as far as the recommendations would like for us to go. For example, we currently have 40 hours of guided driving whenever you have your permit. So we would like to change that to 50 hours instead of 40. And there's also recommendations to reduce the number of youthful passengers whenever you are in that graduated driver's license range from 16 to 18. Currently, you are allowed to have only one passenger under the age of 19 for the first 6 months, but we would like to keep that restriction on one passenger under the age of 21 for those full 2 years. Whenever we transition over to the safer for highway workers, this stuff I would say is important, but everything in this document would affect everybody else on the roadway. It's not just for highway workers, but these are the ones that are probably, if we change, would be most impactful to the people that work along the roadways. So this includes hands-free. Hands-free, obviously, we want people to put their phone down at all times. We don't want them to just not use their phone when they're in work zones, but it is especially dangerous whenever you're in a work zone. We also have seen problems with people driving way over the speed limit in work zones, which something that we think might be able to help is if we piloted an automated enforcement program in work zones to try to get people to slow down. It makes it difficult for law enforcement to enforce that within the work zone. There's problems with following the speeders through the work zone, and problems with trying to make it not more dangerous if you're trying to pull someone over as they go through the work zone. We also have some proposed changes to the endangerment of a highway worker law to make sure that whenever prosecutors are charging this, that the full fine is applied. Moving into the safer for you category, this is kind of the category of everything else, applies to all other drivers and users of the roadway. So one of the recommendations is an ignition interlock for all drivers. Currently in the state, ignition interlock is required for people who are repeat offenders. This would expand it to first-time offenders as well. We also have a proposal for open container and primary seat belts, motorcycle helmets. And then the last one is electric bicycles. There was an electric bicycle bill passed a few years ago that just had some unintended consequences that caused us to become out of compliance with federal law. Since Class 2 electric bicycles are by definition in that bill classified as motor vehicles, repeat offenders who have their licenses revoked would be able to drive these without having a license. So we just want to change the definition to make sure that it's in line with the federal definitions to make sure that we can come back into compliance. So this is really a document that is a big effort for us. It's a start to conversations. A lot of these things are things that legislators don't know that we don't have good laws to comply with federal recommendations or federal guidelines. And it's the start of the conversation. The opinion that we have is that if it's not something that we're starting the conversation for, that it's difficult to say that there's other people that will start the conversation if we don't. So thus far this year, we've seen 8 of these 18 proposals filed. There have been 2 filed in the Senate and 8 filed in the House. We've seen some progress on a couple of these. 4 of them have made it out of committee. Taylor and I have worked on the hands-free Missouri committee, and we've worked especially on the hands-free to see some positive progress on that. I think that's the one that we are definitely the most excited about, the impact it could have on safety and some of the positive progress that it's seen this year. We've also seen some positive progress on the rear facing through age 2 and the booster seats in the house. So I would be happy to take any questions if you all have any.
And I've also got a little bit more information about hands-free if we want to dive into that, whenever we want to dive into that. So. Yeah, you had a question though, go ahead.
Hi, sorry. I wanted some clarity on the e-bike portion of this. So first of all, what federal laws were we out of compliance with? And when you say class 2 e-bikes in my industry, typically that means an e-bike capable of not going more than 20 miles an hour. No one's required to have a driver's license to operate even a class 3 e-bike, which goes up to 28. I'm just very confused about what's
Yes, no, so we're out of compliance with the repeat intoxicated offender driving law. It's 23 USC 164. So it basically says that if you're able to operate without pedaling, so if there's no human effort put into it, that it
like
should
a throttle control, you mean?
Yeah, so the way that the bill was written on a state level, the class 2 e-bikes were the ones that you could operate without having to pedal. And so those are the ones that we wanted to make sure if you didn't have to put any effort into on the part of pedaling it, that it would be classified as a motor vehicle. So you wouldn't be able to operate that if you didn't have a driver's license.
Okay, I have some nerdy taxonomical questions about that that I don't have to bore everybody with. But I also have kind of a follow-up question, which is how is this campaign being synced up with like upstream efforts to not lobby NHTSA to address like the root causes of some of these issues that you're arising? Like, it's difficult for me to think about distracted driving legislation without also addressing the fact that we have little movement on infotainment systems. It's hard to think about hot car deaths without talking about the fact that we don't mandate hot car infant detection systems. Like how is MODOT interfacing with NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, sorry, for the acronym among us on these issues, I guess is the way I'd like to.
Yes, of course. So I guess our big emphasis is that we have these conversations not only on the statewide level, but also with some of our partners in the lobby corps. So it can be difficult to make changes right off the bat. I think it's really more of a conversation starter. We do have a highway safety and traffic division that focuses more on this stuff. So I guess I'm saying that my wheelhouse is more the state capitol versus the highway safety and traffic division. They do more interfacing with NHTSA to, they submit feedback on proposed rules and work with other DOTs and their highway safety and traffic divisions to talk about what sort of things have worked for them and what sort of things could work in Missouri, and to kind of gain traction on the federal level to see what could be changed there too.
Okay. And I have one more question and then I will see the
floor.
On automated enforcement, I'm very heartened to see that we're pursuing a path to bring automated enforcement functionally back to Missouri streets. I'm curious if it is paired with any guidance on how to make that program optimally effective and equitable, specifically things like scaling fines to income, both so wealthier drivers have a real meaningful financial disincentive to discontinue meaningful or dangerous behaviors, and so that the low income are not disproportionately harmed in ways that are not actually making our streets safer, ensuring that like fines are plowed back into road improvements rather than general funds, things like that. Like what other layers of analysis are on top of that automated enforcement bill, or is it just let's get that through the door and we'll figure out details later?
I'll be honest, it's pretty simple in its first iteration. We actually haven't had that one filed. There's a lot of hesitancy in the State House for having automated enforcement along with red light cameras. I know there's a lot of pushback on the privacy aspect of it. So no one has filed it, but we've tried to keep it as simple as possible just because that's the best chance that we have to form a pilot program, because we're not going to get anywhere unless we can prove that it is an effective way to slow people down that isn't also creating any negative effects on the people who travel through the work zone. So I think it is a pretty minimal fine. It's probably more like a parking ticket. So it wouldn't really do a lot for the people that could afford it, but it's more of a pushback to balance the privacy protection concerns.
I'm just going to pop a link into you for some literature that I'm a journalist, that I've reviewed on best practices nationally on this stuff. So just if it's helpful.
Yeah, thanks.
Patrick?
Yeah, so I mean, I have quite a bit of concerns about the bicycle helmets for young riders law. I'm basically in charge of a youth organization in the city of St. Louis that teaches literally thousands of kids how to use a bicycle. And so, you know, while we encourage them to wear their helmets and we think it's incredibly important for them to be wearing their helmets, anytime we're putting laws out there that can be used potentially against our kids is something we're pretty concerned about. You know, this is, to me, is tantamount to jaywalking laws, right? And you see more and more states getting rid of this stuff and going to other methods of education and encouragement over enforcement stuff that's being laid out right here. So I'm pretty concerned to see that we don't have funding available for helmets in the city of St. Louis to give out to our kids. Or to do education campaigns with our students, but we're talking about legislation that would potentially penalize our students for forgetting their helmets or not wearing their helmets.
No, I appreciate that point. I think the big point is these recommendations, we based it off of the National Safety Council and Advocates for Highway and Auto Safety recommendations. So it is a good starting point. This is the first year that we've done this. So we haven't, you know, we're still collecting feedback to see what the iteration looks like next year. And obviously it's hard to do anything without education or enforcement. You could pass a law and not include education or enforcement and it wouldn't really do anything. So we are very cognizant that all three of those things need to work together. And that's a good point to keep in mind for our next iteration next year.
Sorry, we've got a lot of seconds for that. We have a number of questions in the chat, but Taylor, I know you also want to spend a little bit of time getting more into hands-free. We have about 6 minutes left, so maybe I'll give you a few minutes to do that. Everyone who has questions in the chat, we are going to follow up with Erin and Taylor to get some additional detail, which we will share back out.
I'm going to share just some brief stuff here. So again, I'm Taylor March. You all probably previously know me with TrailNet, but I'm now the Executive Director for Missourians for Responsible Transportation. So we are a partnership that was founded in 2018 by four statewide advocacy organizations in the state: TrailNet, Bike Walk KC, Local Motion in Columbia, and Ozark Greenways in Springfield. And we kind of work across the state to try and elevate areas of policy alignment that kind of come up from those four organizations, and then the grassroots organizing that we're doing in rural communities across the state to try and identify issues of transportation need. And our mission is to be the leader in fostering strong communities by aligning advocacy efforts for streets, roads, and trails that work for all Missourians. So why hands-free? So Missouri is one of only 2 states or US territories that doesn't have a no texting while driving ban for adult drivers. Montana is the other, although Montana's law does not preempt local municipalities from enacting texting while driving for adult drivers. So about 2/3 of Montana residents actually are covered by a no texting and driving ban for adults, as opposed to Missouri, when we passed our 2009 graduated driver's license update change that made it so that minors couldn't text and drive. That preempted some of the existing ordinances like the city of Kirkwood had on the books that said that adult drivers couldn't text and drive in those municipalities. Currently, this is a map from the last 10 years of known distracted driving crashes across the state and fatalities. And so the emphasis here is that this is a problem across the state. This isn't like an urban versus rural issue. This is something that impacts every single community in Missouri. When we look at just the sheer quantity, it looks like there's a little bit more of an urban issue, but whenever we split that by fatalities per 1,000 population, it's clear that this is not just a urban issue. This is an urban and a rural issue across the state. This is a updated one-pager. So as Erin mentioned already, we're together on a group called Hands Free Missouri, which is a coalition of victims advocates, people who've lost loved ones, who have been personally injured by distracted drivers, auto insurance groups, advocacy groups, MODOT, others, who are all kind of have come together to kind of put together information about education around distracted driving laws in Missouri. And so this is a one-pager that group has developed that we use for educating local legislators about the need for hands-free legislation in Missouri. So if you would like this, I'd be happy to follow up with Liz and I'll make sure that this is available, but just wanted to elevate this as a resource for advocating for those things. One thing I want to kind of highlight on this is the legislation and the bills that have been, these were bills that were pre-filed in the session, but Senate Bill 56 and 61 are the ones that are moving kind of most quickly at this point. Those have been both assigned and passed through committee and have been passed on to the formal calendar. It's actually currently number 9 on the formal calendar. And so those bills have been combined. There have been some amendments added. It's a really, really good bill. It really encompasses everything we were hoping to see in a hands-free law. And so the hope is that that would pass through the formal calendar, be voted on the Senate side, and then probably switch over to the House from there, is currently what we're thinking the traction will be on that. There is
Taylor,
companion bills that are the same on the House side. So
was that's 5661.
5661. And it's also been renamed the Siddons, and I'm gonna forget the other person's name. So two of the victims advocates that are a part of the coalition who lost loved ones, it's been renamed in their family members' honors. So if you look at, I'll drop a link in the chat. Actually, I did already to Charles's question. That's the bill text, the combined bill text as it currently sits. And so you can track it through there. So if you search Senate Bill 56, that's where they're combining everything right now. So, and just the coalition, the group, some of the members and folks that it encompasses at this point. And we have a steering committee, a group of victims advocates, data education, and then also a policy and lobbying group that kind of talks about where things are at. So always happy to add new folks to that as well. So I will, in the sake of time, kind of stop for questions there.
Okay. Erin, Taylor, thank you so much. We have a number of questions that we will follow up with both of you about in the next few days. So thank you again for your time, and it looks like there's quite a bit to take on. I am going to very quickly transition us to our subcommittee updates. We have already done 2 of these, but I want to give a chance for Dawn to give a quick update on the engagement committee, and then Rachel to give a quick update on Safe Streets and when they'll meet next.
Yes, so the engagement committee subcommittee meets every 3rd Wednesday, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. I dropped my email in the chat a couple of times throughout this meeting, but if anyone is interested in joining the discussion about the best way to be transparent about votes, except like beyond meeting notes and our letters on our website, please email me. I'm happy to include anyone in that discussion or even just send me suggestions. Updates. We have the engagement subcommittee voted, approved 3 voting members. And so now it goes to the current voting members for approval. Patrick, your question in the chat about January's meeting notes, that's because there was no voting member being voted on. We actually, besides these, the last time we had any votes was in October. So the past couple meeting notes won't have any votes in it for a voting member. And also the engagement subcommittee is looking at hosting a couple webinars or 1 or 2 over the next year to educate people on different topics. We hosted one this past December on Vision Zero that was very successful. So if you have any ideas for that, please feel free to email me again. If you have connections or anything that you think would be useful, just email me. Theme of the day, email me.
Thanks, Dawn. Rachel, you have a quick update, next meeting time?
Yes, our next meeting is next week on Tuesday at 11 a.m. on Zoom. If you're interested, please reach out, rachel@southgrand.org, and I'll drop it in the chat. And we're really excited to have Christine and Gracia join our Safe Streets subcommittee. Again, I had a great meeting with President Green a few weeks back on some initiatives that the Safe Streets is working on, and we're excited to work with the Board of Aldermen. So thanks for everyone for their help.
Great. Thanks, everyone. That concludes our meeting for today. We appreciate your time and participation, and we will meet again next month. More to come. Thank you all so much.